Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Saturday, March 27th. So I went over the bank data, came out yesterday, some really interesting stuff. First of all, banks were big buyers of Treasury securities in the week ending March 17th. Now, why is that interesting? Why is that important? Why is it telling? Because that was the week we saw that huge 180 billion increase in bank reserves. And remember, there was a lot of concern about this. Even I was talking about it, a month or so prior, just how is that going to affect the banks? But mostly, we saw the comments out there online that the banks were going to have to liquidate treasuries. And in fact, what happened was they were big buyers. And I said this the other day, I don't know if you picked up on this or not, but you can't deleverage, the banks cannot deleverage by liquidating treasuries. Because when they sell a treasury, they get a cash deposit in return. So their assets remain unchanged. All right, this was a narrative going on for weeks and weeks and weeks that banks were going to have to sell treasuries. I was a skeptic about it. I said I did not see really any evidence of it. There was a week or two, actually more than that. It was like a 5 or 6 week period where we saw, and I talked about this in one of my prior videos, there was like a 54 billion decline in one segment of the treasury, of their treasury holdings, probably T-bills, 54 billion. But, they hold over 1.2 trillion of those particular securities. So 54 billion was a very small amount. But anyway, in that week ending March 17th, which saw a huge increase, that was the biggest increase in reserves for a single week. You had to go all the way back to April 2020. That's when we had the big stimulus, the first checks that went out from that first stimulus. So that really flooded the banking system with reserves. So it was almost like the biggest 1 week increase in a year. And banks were net buyers of treasuries. The other thing that was interesting was an enormous contraction in loans and leases. Now, at first glance, you might, look at that and think, oh boy, that's some kind of a bad indication for the economy. I mean, loans and leases dropped by almost 70 billion in that 1 week period, the week ending March 17th. You got to go all the way. That was the biggest 1 week decline in loans and leases in 14 years. And so, at first glance, you might look at that and say, oh boy, that is a bad indicator for the economy, loans drying up. But look, how can loans contract? There's only one way, well, two ways actually, but really only one way that loans can contract. They got to be paid off. When they're paid off, they disappear. The other way is that they can be written off if they're bad, but I don't think that's what happened in this case, because here's what's interesting about the week ending March 17th. That's when 240 billion of stimulus checks went out. So, you see where I'm going? People got checks, 241 billion of stimulus checks went out that week. Roughly a quarter of that money was used to pay down debt. That's why we saw that contraction in loans and leases. At least that's what I think is what happened there. So that's not a bad thing. I mean, it just improves the financial condition of, households. So that's not bad. So that was the main takeaway. The other thing is, if you look at the CFTC commitments of trader report, commitments of traders, in the dollar index, dealers are very short the dollar right now. They flipped over 2 weeks ago. They were long the dollar from like November into about 2 weeks ago. Then they flipped short and they got even more short. Gold producers, again, net buyers of gold futures. Now this has been going on now for like the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks, 3, 4, 5 weeks. I got to go back and look, but they've been net buyers of gold down here. I mean, they obviously see value here. It's kind of rare to see commodity producers, you know, buying futures long in that commodity, because they're always long the physical. They have the physical. They're the producers, so they're usually net short. Gold producers are net short, but they've been net buyers over the last 3 or 4 weeks. So again, I just think they see value down here. And that's pretty much it. I mean, that's was an interesting week. Of course, I'm gonna analyze all this stuff in the report that goes out on Monday. So, hey, tonight's the big fight, UFC Heavyweight Championship. Who you got? I'm going with Stipe Miocic. It's Miocic against Francis Ngannou. It's going to be a fantastic fight. My money. And interestingly enough, Stipe, who has defended his belt more times than any other heavyweight, he's the underdog in this, according to Vegas odds. I'm going with Stipe. I think he's going to get it done. Who you got? Leave your comments or leave your responses in the comments section below. See everybody tomorrow. Bye-bye.